They don't
Aside
call
from
us
that,
knuckleheads for nothing.
Yeah, without a doubt.
well, everything's so confusing with all this government distortion. It's hard to even figure out where we're at in time.
Yeah, distortion of markets
Exactly.
and time itself.
Yes.
But anyways, let me get back to the script. We're trying to bring you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have a special guest with us, and it's Michael Rogers. And what we're going to talk with him about is his efforts to develop these, what we're calling freedom parties. They're sort of get-togethers with people, to try and, I guess, raise awareness about sort of our loss of liberty, so to sort of organize our friends and neighbors. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Let me introduce you to the rest of the panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is
From
a
the
pilot in the
dead.
state of California. Yeah, he's grounded today.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm
And
bedridden.
well, in our upper right-hand corner, we have Michael Rogers. And so some of the topics we're going to go over today, like I said, we're going to talk with Michael Rogers for the first half of the show about those freedom parties. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the government's war on landlords. We're also going to talk about sort of who decides issues of child identity in the foster care system. That really hasn't come up much, but we saw an article about that the other day. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about in our Knucklehead Noise Patrol about sort of the fuzzy math behind some of Biden's Green New Deal stuff. So, but before we get into that, one of the new segments we've been doing right off the beginning of the show is to introduce a quote of a liberty-minded person to just, get the ball rolling and kind of let you know what we're sort of about on this channel. And so, James, our invisible hand, maybe if you could bring up our quote of the day today. So today's quote of the day is from Ron Paul, sort of our guru of liberty. And he is, in this particular quote, he is saying real patriotism is a willingness to challenge the government when it's wrong. So, and hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about that kind of thing in this Freedom Party discussion. Do you guys want to jump in on this quote before we get going with the interview?
I'm wondering when it's right.
Well,
Yeah.
I was wondering when the government was right, but okay.
But it's shades of Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah. Well, I certainly think that's gosh, that's a great insight though, Tim, on that idea that when is it right? Because we seem to always be hitting more when it's wrong, and maybe when Thomas Jefferson around, maybe it was right a little more often.
Yeah.
Today, can't even figure out what a woman is. My God.
really.
But Jefferson knew that it could go wrong, and he said it was our obligation, our duty, or an obligation and right to question the government and take even more action if necessary.
And I agree. I think patriotism should be that we should always have the freedom to challenge our government. I mean, I don't think Ron Paul is totally correct with this statement, because he's saying when it's wrong. Well, I don't think we should wait to we have to figure out when are we wrong? When are they wrong? They might be wrong here. They might be right there. No, we should be free. If you want to talk about patriotism should be the freedom to challenge your government at all times, right or wrong. Sometimes we may be mistaken in our challenge, but that's the nature of our representative republic. We should challenge our government at all times. These people should know their place. This is the one people who the government I'm talking about at all levels. These are the one people who should know their damn place. So we should be challenging them at all times.
And that's a scary thing, Leon, too, is that what we saw recently from the Biden administration as Homeland Security Bureau of Misinformation that he tried to put in is he wants to tell us that they will tell us when the government is right and it's wrong, and whenever he's in charge, it's right.
Exactly. I mean, the bureaucracy in all governments, and this is not unique to the United States, they become an entity unto themselves where their sole purpose becomes their own self-survival, not serving the people that they were intended to serve. So we should be challenging them at all times, at every level, all the time, because the greatest destruction of liberty that we have ever seen in human history have always come from governments, always.
Well, speaking of that, that's a great transition to talk about these freedom parties that we wanted to get into in our discussion with Michael today. And James, maybe you could bring back this visual. I think this kind of advertises maybe a little bit about what these freedom parties might be about and the idea of standing up to government when we think they're wrong. This is a sign that Michael has put in his window occasionally, I guess, during this COVID era. And it says, as free Americans, we will not comply with unconstitutional medical or political mandates that violate our basic rights. And so I recently attended one of these freedom parties that he was having at his house. And it seemed to be a whole lot of people that just had a lot of concerns about what was going on with our government. And it would seem to be a real positive environment, a real sort of liberty-minded environment. But Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about what these freedom parties are and sort of, how you got the idea for them?
Well, it's kind of organic. I've been a patriot my life, all my life. I'm a vet. And when COVID hit, and I've operated most of my life under illusions about our government and many of the institutions that it employs. But when COVID hit and they started cracking down on people and they started telling you could not go out of your homes, you could not have other people into your homes. And they started telling us what to do in clear violation of the First Amendment rights of free speech and assembly. And so when this happened, basically me and my wife, Sherry, we said, well, the heck with these guys. If they're telling us we can't, we should. And so we had 8 people over for dinner. So there's, 6 people over. There was 8 of us there to start this. All of us, this is right in the thick of COVID when the fear was just palpable everywhere you went, masks on everybody. But we weren't afraid because we're godly people in our household and we have a strong belief in God. And so, with that belief, if you really truly believe it, it really handles the fear to a large extent. And so we started inviting people over and people would come in and we would hug. And it would be the first contact they had in months to another human being. And people literally cried just on that contact. And so we realized on that first dinner, pardon me, that this was something that was needed by people. We needed to get together. We needed to assemble. And we needed to exercise our freedom of speech critically at this moment because they are trying to shut it down. And this is so un-American, so unconstitutional that it really raised awareness in my family and also among our friends, many of our friends, that something wrong was happening here. Something was going wrong as Leon was talking. And when you see something wrong, you got to stand up. And so we decided that, after that first dinner, we decided, well, we're going to make this a tradition here at our household. And so we tried to have a meeting, and it just every 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and it just grew. And now, like at the one that you attended, Jason, we had over 30 people there, and served dinner for 30 people, and a potluck. But that was the primary reason that we got together, is just because they told us we couldn't.
So, Michael, during COVID, when you were doing this, did you have any pushback from your neighbors, from anybody in your community or anything like that?
Oh yeah. I got canceled by numerous people. Some of them have come back, and these are good people. They're just frightened, and sort of brainwashed to follow authority to an excessive degree. And we got a lot of pushback from our spiritual community, and which drove me crazy because we're a spiritual community. We're supposed to trust God, and yet they shut the church down. And it was like it was just not a good scene for us. And so, yeah, we got a lot of problems.
Well, Michael, on that note about the church, I that was one of the things we really saw that was kind of crazy on the whole COVID thing is the government really put its foot down on churches, which, to see that you're getting pushback within your church community when the churches are the ones who are really getting stepped on. We saw issues of like where ministers tried to organize in ways that were in keeping with the government's intent to keep people separated, where they would try to go to a drive-in of all places and have everybody in their cars, and the government would still come around and fine them all for getting together, even though they were all separated by cars with windows rolled up and everything else. It just, absolutely amazing the things that were going on. And yet, at the same time, they would tell everybody, we're all going to go peacefully protest, fiery but peacefully protest for George Floyd, where you'd see the mayors out there and other people with no masks standing in groups, and somehow the magical thinking that it's okay if it's a cause we like, but if it's religion, no, we're not going to let you guys operate. So it just it really catches me that your religious community was kind of so in line with the government. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that or not.
Well, I could sort of explain it, and it wasn't just mine. We tried to go to various churches during that period, and to go and attend various churches because ours got shut down. But I could tell you what one of the big reasons was, and it was money. They were offering our church, it was like $100,000, $150,000 or something like that, to in a loan. Maybe it was more than that. It was a large sum of money, but they offered that if they would comply.
Wow! So this was like, so this almost sounds like it was these guaranteed loans to businesses to shut down or whatever, and so they literally considered the church a business, and therefore, wow, I'd never really even heard of that aspect of this. So this is all kind of eye-opening to me, that they silence churches in the religious community by essentially bribing them.
Woo. Exactly.
With whose money? Was this with taxpayer money?
Yes.
Wow.
To my knowledge, okay, I don't want to speak beyond my knowledge, but it came from someplace, and where's the most likely spot?
Obviously, yes, without a doubt. But this just highlights the whole point that we started off with. This is why we should always challenge our government, because here we have the government was picking winners and losers with our money. Okay, during COVID, they were picking winners and losers. So you could protest because of George Floyd. That is social justice. So that was fine. But if you and all the mostly peaceful protests, that was all fine. But if you want to gather for a religious assembly of some kind, that is out of bounds, and we should be shut down. You should be fined. So it just highlights the whole issue here. We must at all times challenge our government and their dictates.
Well, let me add that my wife was the head of the prayer chaplains that church, and the last straw for us was they demanded she get a vaccination. And if not, that she had to test every time she went in and put the ethylene oxide up her nose, and it was just not acceptable to us. And she had to tell all of her chaplains to get vaccinated, and she said, "I will not do that." And so again, this is a freedom. These people have the right to make a medical decision for themselves, and so she quit, and that pretty much ended our. A lot of the people at that Freedom Party, Jason, from that church. So it's not like that the whole church was, lost. Mm-hmm. It was just that the leadership, in my opinion, they accepted, as Leon said, a bribe.
Yeah.
And also, I think they were frightened. I think, this was early in COVID, and people were genuinely frightened. And I understand that, but it just struck me as odd that in a spiritual community that had put their trust in God, that they'd be so scared all the time.
Well, Michael, I wanted to follow up with something you said, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but do you know if it was the church that decided that independently that they wanted everybody vaccinated, or was it maybe some kind of a government sort of strong arm that everybody needed to be vaccinated within the church? Because it sounded like, or at least in the chaplainship, I guess, of the church.
It was both. They were getting strong arm from the government, but then they complied. I mean, we do not comply. But, they complied because they were getting pressure. There's no doubt they were getting a lot of pressure, and they were getting a big, a carrot hanging out there for them too. So, and, a lot of churches are in financial stress. And so they complied. And so, everybody makes their own choices, but we decided that wasn't right for us.
Yeah, we talk about, we liberty minded. We talk about people making choices, and and sometimes we are willing to bear the consequences. But complying with some of these mandates becomes so easy when even private businesses get involved with forcing us into compliance. My son is involved in the entertainment in the entertainment industry, and he was having a play, and I wanted to go to it. But the people where it was being held said that you cannot come unless you're vaccinated. So I want to support my son. But my principals tell me I should not get the vaccine. So what did I do? I complied. So I got the vaccine so that I can support my son in his endeavor.
A lot of people did that. I mean, and my sons did it because they had to work. They're working age and they're flying, and right. I begged them not to. I begged them. Yes. I mean, I called them on the phone and cried on the phone. Said, "Please do not do this to yourself." But everybody makes their own choice. They're men, so
sure, exactly. Yes.
One of the things too about the vaccine is that it's one of those things from a liberty-minded person. It's fine for everybody to make their own choice, but when the government is putting their thumb on the scale and sitting there and essentially forcing all of us, that's the crazy thing. And of course, what we're finding out now is that there's a lot of things that these companies themselves were immunized from. So, whether or not their immunizations worked on us, and the jab is one thing, but they were given immunizations about us being able to come back at them and sue them if something happened to us. So, and of course, there's a lot of secrecy. They're also being allowed to hide a lot of this information. In fact, there was one point, I can't remember whether I heard it on Napolitano's show in an interview or somebody else's, but they were talking about the idea that they wanted to be able to hide these records for 75 years to not let the public see them, which is insane, right? I mean, it's one thing if the government is saying, hey, look, this is an emergency. We've got a project here and you can partake in it if you want to. And here's all the information. But to hide the information, to not tell us, to continually lie to us, as Fauci did on so many things with respect to this a vaccine and also the coronavirus or this COVID itself. This is just insanity on all this. It's sort of just have faith in GOV.
Yes.
Have faith in Gov. So
well, it's the antithesis of informed consent. They did not tell us everything that they knew about these, and they kept it secret. We now know that there's many things about all of these vaccines that were never properly vetted. And the test, and I mean, just on the surface of it, guys, how do you do long-term testing in 3 months, 4 months? I mean, it's just absurd. That's the one that stopped me right there. It was like, no, you don't know what's going to happen in the long term with this because you have never tested it long term. You got to give it time. So but it is the antithesis of informed consent. They withheld information. They told you it was safe and effective. They told you it would stop transmission, they told us all kinds of lies.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. No, and this is one of the crazy things. It's like you say, the whole idea of did this thing get enough time? well, on the one hand, they tell us that the FDA is a necessary organization and that it's there to keep us safe from making decisions for ourselves about what to put in our own bodies, so that, if you want to even be involved in some testing of a life-saving drug, you can't be unless you get their permission to. So, I mean, these are the types of things. And then on the other hand, they tell us that those processes that they set in place that take 5 to 10 years, now suddenly, oh, well, they're not really that necessary. You better just take this and don't ask any questions. So that's kind of what we saw from government speaking out of both sides of its mouth in this whole thing. And I almost think that, well, if we're libertarians, are we better off just throwing out the whole FDA thing? Or are we better off saying, hey, maybe it was supposed to take 5 to 10 years to get this thing right?
I hate to sound redundant here, but this goes back to the very point of why we started the show. The government too often speaks out of both sides of its mouth. So why would we have to wait until it is wrong before we challenge? We should always challenge. This is why I somewhat disagree with Ron Paul's statement.
Well, the CDC, NIH, none of their employees had to take the vaccination.
You're right.
None of them.
Yeah.
And neither did the Pfizer company, Moderna. All of these were exempted from taking, all of the employees were exempted from taking these vaccinations. And the CDC, I mean, well, we could go down this rabbit hole, but there's clearly were things that were unconstitutional, wrong, and the government was clearly behind a lot of unethical, immoral activities.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's as far as that goes, I wanted to sort of bring it back to the Freedom Parties thing a little bit while we're still in the public access show, Michael. And so I guess one thing I didn't get out at the beginning of the show, my fault, but so this was taking place in the Sacramento region. I don't want to, get any more specific than that, but that's where you were doing your, Freedom Party, and that's of course where some of us are hosting out of here. The show, that's where we do it out of, but. How long have you been a Sacramento resident? And is this kind of the worst you've seen it get, I guess, in Sacramento?
I've been a resident since 1950, and because until about 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was immersed in illusion about our society, about our government. And, I knew we had problems, but I really felt deep down that our government was, still good, and still looking out for the people. But a lot of things woke me up. I read a book called Creature from Jekyll Island that blew my mind, by G. Edward Griffin. And it opened me up to all kinds of things. But yeah, I was born here, I was raised here, and I haven't seen it. I have never seen it anywhere in this nation, but particularly in California and Sacramento, this kind of tyranny imposed on the people.
Yeah. And just for the audience too, Creature from Jekyll Island, that's a book about the beginning of the Federal Reserve, right? That's correct.
The history of money. The history of money.
Yeah.
Well, the history of the American Central Bank, at least.
Well, they go back. Actually, he goes back to the beginning. He talks about, he actually talks about the basis of money. So
I don't mean to correct the guest, Michael, especially one that's 2 years older than me and looks better than I do. But yeah, the Phoenicians would have an issue with your statement that that it's about the history of money. Although he. I actually haven't read that book, and I should, but I don't know. Maybe he did go back and talk about the history of money to lay the foundation for the book. I'm not sure.
No, he does. He calls it. He went back to Babylonia and fractional banking, and that's where it originated. He covered the whole thing and how the money is dishonest and it's a Ponzi scheme and it's inevitably going to crash on us. And so it really opened my eyes to a lot of things. I have a business degree. One of my degrees is in business, and they didn't teach me any of this stuff.
No, of course not. Yeah, so I sit corrected.
So it sounds like it's really the history of funny money is what we're talking about. Government funny money. No, I guess real money is money that everybody trusts. Essentially, that's the key element behind it. And I think the way things are going right now, we're losing an awful lot of trust from the inflation that we're seeing happening.
It's the whole banking system is a confidence game, and we all know that our money is not truly in the bank, and so it just depends on us not all going down to pick it up at the same time like they did in 1928. So it's a confidence game, and it's, there's positives to it, but there's a whole lot of negatives to it. But yeah.
Well, getting back to the freedom parties too, as well as far as that goes, what are some of the things I think that guests have expressed to you that they've gotten out of coming to these parties? And I know you talked about some, just the physical contact was amazing for some of them, but what have some of them come up and talked to you about their experiences and their value in this?
Absolutely, and I'd say the biggest benefit for the people that are attending these freedom parties is that we realize we're not alone, that we're not thinking things that nobody else is thinking, and that in fact we share many of these same thoughts. Now everybody that attends these things, nobody thinks exactly alike, and we don't want everybody to think exactly alike, but this is one thing that really stood out, is that it wasn't just a physical human contact, it was the mental, the intellectual engagement, and realizing that they were concerned about the freedom, they were concerned about the future for their kids, they were concerned about the same things that I was, and they were concerned about their liberty, for sure. And so being able to get together and just talk, to exercise our First Amendment, to assemble and to express ourselves freely, it really, how can I say this? It gave everybody confidence that to stand and resist the tyranny that was being imposed upon us, and we all learn from each other too. I've learned a lot from these people. So,
well, and I want to jump into a little more on that, but I want to say goodbye first to our guests on Public Access. If you're watching on Public Access, we've got to go, but this conversation will continue online, and so you can come and follow the rest of this at Facebook, Rumble, Spotify, and YouTube. Just look up Knuckleheads of Liberty, and you should be able to catch the rest of this conversation and conversations we've had with many other people in different communities organizing for liberty around the country and then maybe in your region. So go check those out. But for now, back to the conversation. So, Michael, one of the things I wanted to ask you about from that is, you said it gave people confidence. Has this inspired them to branch out on their own or to organize outside of your parties to push anything politically, like maybe to as far as political action, or to reach out and start, I guess, or gatherings of their own?
Yeah, well, yes, some of that's happened, and we've also connected with other people who are having groups of people assemble when they weren't supposed to. There's a group out in the Rockland area that is active, and there's others, and so. But yes, it gave them the confidence to speak. See, this to me, this is the big issue, is political correctness. They keep us all silent. They keep our opinions hidden from each other, and so we think the other people are thinking that the government's doing the right thing, and that we're the outsiders, we're the outcasts. But as it turns out, so many of us were thinking the same thought, and so it's what it's doing, and it's what I advocate for, is honesty. It's just that when you speak to people, and if somebody challenges your values, your beliefs, your fundamental liberties, then you speak up and you speak your truth, and you be honest. And it's my firm belief that if we're all just honest with each other, that we would resolve a lot of these things very quickly.
The only problem, and I mean, I agree. I agree that if we could all be honest, a lot of things will resolve. But I think what could be resolved quite easily and peacefully. The problem is that the pursuit of power corrupts all forms of discussion and resolutions of simple problems. That pursuit is the danger that I think we face in our society today, the pursuit of power.
Yeah, well, our founders, they put their life, their liberty, and their honor on the line. This country was not founded out of safety and security; it was founded out of liberty. That is the core principle that stands underneath this nation, and really, I think all creatures, all beings want freedom. At some point, at some level.
Yes.
Do they? That's what I'm discovering now with the people that I've interacted with, is that I think we're the rarity nowadays. I think most people want just safety and security above all else, and I think we saw that in COVID with the mass hysteria of safety and all this nonsense of this thing that I push back on: stay safe. I can fly safe. I can fly as safely as possible. There's no way in hell, no matter what, even sitting in my, even climbing into my shower, where over 600 people a year die of slipping and falling in the shower in the United States alone.
Nope. Talking about slipping and falling, you just slipped out of the stream, Tim.
You just slipped on us, Tim.
Am I back or?
Yeah, you're back.
We're hearing you.
Yeah, it rearranged. Now I'm in the upper right for some reason. Oh, now I'm back where I belong.
Well, here we go.
There we go. Okay.
Down in the lower right.
Okay. What did you want to finish your thought real quick, Tim? Or
no, that's okay. Whatever.
Well, I used to think the same thing, Tim. I used to think the same thing, that and there is certainly what we call safetyism. That's a big deal today. By the way, I say, be free when I'm leaving people. I don't say stay safe. I said be free. That's one of the things that came out of these freedom parties. Like I said, a lot of the people that attended this, the last one and many, were from our spiritual community. And if you were there, you would never have known what these people thought. As a matter of fact, some people that showed up, including Jeff, Jason, saw people there. He said, "Oh my God, I had no idea this person was, somebody who believed in freedom and liberty." Because they were in a different setting and they acted different. But here, so what I'm saying, Tim, is that I think there's a lot more people like us than you might realize, and that's what these parties have shown me. A lot of people, I thought, they're over here. Well, no, they're over there. And
and just to clarify too,
I'm very cynical. I'll agree. So that that would be nice. I would hope that's true. Go ahead, Jace.
Well, I was just going to say, when you mentioned Jeff, that's my brother, so that's how I got connected with Michael on this. Is that, and I think there might have been somehow a tie-in through a church that caused all this. So it's a great, just a few degrees of separation, and boom, we found liberty. So
it's an unexpected place.
Yeah. No, that's great. But, that's one thing, too, that you mentioned as well, that I think because we're in a place like California, and, we've seen this polarization in the country that's happened, and that there's at least for sort of liberty-minded or potentially conservative people, and those aren't always completely overlapping, but in a lot of cases there are. One of the things we've seen is that you've kind of got to keep it under the radar here in California. There's so many people who have such implicit trust in the Democrat politicians and big government that it's just like if you step out of line, that it's like you were talking about earlier, Michael, about being canceled just for wanting to think differently. It's kind of, I guess that's kind of the place we're in, and maybe it's sort of the opposite way in some solid red states, but at least in the solid blue states, that's the experience I've had, is that you got to be careful about what you say, because talking about liberty related things somehow gets you labeled alt-right or worse. Maybe they'll start calling you a racist or something.
Or worse, you're a Trump supporter, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but but it goes back to the point I was trying to make. All of this centers around the pursuit of power. I mean, we've seen some things about what the left is trying to do these days, but look at what they're trying to do. Essentially, is to silence us. That's all they're trying to do. They're trying to silence us in pursuit of their own agenda, their own power, and their own desire to control our lives, the way we speak, the way we think, and the way we interact with each other. And this is all about the pursuit of power.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's my age, I'm not sure, but at some point, I think that book that woke me up, but I don't care anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't care if they cancel me. I don't give a rat's rump about it anymore. If they don't like me, there's the door, basically. And what I've found is that courage is contagious. I stand up, and if somebody's being an idiot to me, I call them an idiot. And I don't care. I don't care about their feelings if they're saying things that are destructive. And I think it's contagious. When people see other people standing up, they're more willing to stand up themselves. And so I think that's part of the honesty thing, is we set an example for each other, and that, gosh, I didn't die. That person left, but I'm okay still. So to me, that's why I keep coming back to this honesty thing, is that once we really know what each other think, we have a much better chance of working this out and returning to a constitutional republic that we should be in. We're obviously, gentlemen, we're not in a constitutional republic right now. We're in a criminal enterprise of some sort that's deep, and it's really gone way too far. So it's time for us to take the republic back.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to say too before we jump on to some of our other topics is I wanted to ask you if you have advice for anybody who's listened to this and they said, man, this sounds great. I want to start a freedom party in my neighborhood. Do you have any advice for how somebody might get going on this kind of endeavor? What would you tell them?
Just get started, invite a few friends over for dinner and say, hey, the purpose of this dinner is we're going to speak our minds. Nothing's off limits. You can say whatever you like. And, this is all about liberty and about our right to get together and share our presence with one another. It started with our friends. We invited our friends over, but now many of the people that attend these, we don't know on a personal basis. That they're recommended, and so far we've said yes to every person that was asked to come. There's been and it's been just fantastic experience. So I would encourage everybody who has the space, has the time to try this, because we have gotten out of this so much more than the people that come to these things. It's just been an enriching experience, and it's a reconnection with community. Which is, again, they're trying to isolate us. They're trying to push us out. I've been called a racist. I've been called a right-wing extremist because I supported the Second Amendment by actually the old pastor of my church, right-wing extremist. But bottom line, Jason, is I think that just get started. Invite some friends over and say, hey, we're just going to speak our minds and see where it goes.
I would have really liked to know for what purpose you were called a racist, Mike. I really would have liked to know that,
the reason I got called a racist was because I was praising the Constitution.
Oh, Lord.
And they said, well, don't you know the founders were slave owners? You racist. I mean, it's beyond belief. Really,
Yeah.
It's really beyond belief what some people's minds have gotten twisted to by the government. And the education system that we've got here in America.
They're always trying to save us black people. Don't worry. They're trying to save us.
I'm not worried. That's what I'm saying. I've come to the point in my life where I don't care what they think about me or how they feel about my words. I'm going to speak my truth, and let the chips fall.
Yeah, that's the kind of people that turn me cynical.
Well, I tell you, let's jump on to some of these other topics real quick. Maybe we have just a little bit of time to hit them. One of the topics I wanted to talk about, and this goes down to a little bit of this whole lockdown mentality that everybody had, and we saw it accelerate during the lockdowns too. But it's the government's war against landlords. So we saw them. There was no, so the government first locked everybody down for COVID because they said, "Oh my God, this is something that is going to kill everybody, so nobody can do anything." But they kind of forgot that if we're all locked down and nobody's working, then nobody can afford the cost of housing or getting their food or anything else. So then the government then said, "Oh, well, you know what we'll do now? We'll just force these people who are renters to give out their service for free." Essentially, I mean, they said, "Well, we'll catch you later, maybe, but at least initially, you're not going to be able to evict anybody." So this voluntary association you had with somebody called a tenant, where you both agreed to a contract, that contract's out the window now because government just did whatever it did. And so we've seen that happen, and a lot of people go bankrupt essentially because people stop paying rent. Even people who got money from the government occasionally didn't give it to their landlord. So that's what we saw. But now we've seen all these other affronts as well happening to landlords. And so, James, maybe you could bring up the visual. Here in Seattle, the government has now decided that if you're a landlord, they're not going to let you see whether or not a person has a criminal background before you decide to rent to them. You just have to rent to them regardless. And even, I suppose, if the crime is skipping out on your last landlord, I suppose. I don't know.
Or destroying his property, destroying the property as you were leaving. Yes.
Or maybe the guy's last residence was a meth lab, and he burned the house down and got arrested for meth. About that.
Well, but that's not just it. There's these things, and then we also have these other things that are coming in other areas. So that was in Seattle. This one, I believe, is in Los Angeles. Yeah, it says Los Angeles here, and they have a proposal where if you want to be an Airbnb host, I guess you have to get police permission to do that. So you own a house and you want to let somebody rent it, you need the police's permission. And the article also goes to talk about some other crazy stuff too, where the unions there want to force the hotels to, if they have a vacancy, that you have to offer those rooms to homeless people. So, which I can't imagine a better business model than you're trying to attract people to come to your hotel, and suddenly there's people dragging their tents through the lobby. So some of these things are just absolutely nuts. Anyways, let me hand this to you guys. Crazy war against property rights, I guess, and being a landlord. What do you guys think about this?
But it's a real problem when we have the government. Here we go again with the government making choices for us. It is the government giving rights to people on other people's property. Okay? So it's essentially what they have is legal squatting going on here. So the hotel, they have an empty room. Well, they have to offer it to a homeless person. It is the government mandating that. So they are giving property rights on our property to other people. So for instance, a criminal, okay, we have some rental property. A criminal or ex-convict or somebody who was formerly incarcerated, however you want to call that person, comes to us, they want to rent one of our units. And we can look at his or her background. What kind of disaster we might be creating here? This person might be a sex offender. Well, I know in the Seattle they made some exception for a sex offender. He might be a danger to the other people in my that's also renting from me. So the rights of the criminal is being elevated above the rights of the landlord to start with, and above the rights of the people who live next door.
Well,
this is a potential problem, serious problem.
Can I add to that, Leon? I mean, or ask, or So it's like when you say about that, yeah, I think you're right. They're saying that the rights of these tenants override the rights of the landowner. And but my question is, what rights are we referring to with the tenant? Because you don't have here, and here's what people think is that you have a right to a roof over your head. You have a right to a place to live in with a roof over your head, essentially. So, you have a right to access that with your own money and under contract with the person that owns it. If that's you, that's another contract. But you have that right, but you don't have a right to a roof over your head. You don't have that right, and that's the thing. So when Leon mentions this, I think it's important to note that today there is this undercurrent that people have a right to food and shelter and clothing. You have a right to be able to get that, to in the free market, sure, okay, but that doesn't mean you have a right to it. In other words, it's like I need clothes on my back, so therefore I'm going to go into Walmart and pick out an outfit, and I'm going to walk out with it because I have a right to it, right? No, you have a right to access. You can go into Walmart and pay for it and then leave with it, sure. But anyway, that's all I want.
What question I have is, where does this come from? I mean, again, this is an informed consent type of a thing where they're forcing ignorance upon you. But where does this come from? And is this government ineptitude, or is it government malfeasance? And in my opinion, it's malfeasance. This is an intentional act to try to, again, disrupt our society. I mean, there's other examples of this, Jason. That, for instance, Governor Newsom signed a bill that allows developers to come into every neighborhood, regardless of the zoning requirements, etc. And they can take and pull down in the middle of your street a single family home and put up a 6 unit apartment building without fees, without any concessions for parking or any of these other things. It's madness, and it's disrupting to neighborhoods, and it's really all part and parcel of the same thing as far as I'm concerned, which is part of the government, which has gone rogue, which is unconstitutional, which is being tyrannical to the people, stepping on our liberty, and trying to really disrupt our way of life, the American way of life, and bring us into something new, which, we could talk about, the Great Reset, the New World Order, whatever you want to call it. But there's definitely a plan out there. And I think the government has been co-opted. We're no longer a constitutional republic, and we've got to get back.
Yeah.
Well,
Always, we must always challenge our government. Always. This is why I disagreed with Ron Paul's statement somewhat. We can't wait until, quote unquote, when they're wrong. We must challenge them.
In fairness, I don't think Ron Paul is necessarily expecting you to argue with them when he thinks they're right, which is very rare. I assume he just assumes you're thinking they're wrong, and that's what he wants you to argue.
Okay, fair enough. I'll give you that.
But I did. Oh, sorry.
I would like to add this to a previous question. I forgot to say this. This group, we have gone down to the Capitol. We've attended, protests. We've carried our signs. We've went to Kaiser and supported the nurses, when they were, went from hero to zero. So this group has been doing some activism, but it's an individual basis. We get together and we assemble there. But so there's been that added aspect to these freedom parties.
Okay, now that's interesting. I did want to jump in on one thing that you said, though, in this last thing with neighborhoods, though. I think from a liberty-minded perspective, I think a lot of us would be okay if if you had contracts in your neighborhood, like say, for instance, if you joined an organization where they said, look, this is the rules for this neighborhood, and therefore I'm joining that contract, and therefore that's what we're going to put into. The problem is government currently sets a lot of restrictions on a neighborhood, and then they turn around and they change it when it becomes politically, I guess, expedient for them. And one of these issues is, like you're saying, combining types of housing. So you buy a house thinking you're in a neighborhood that's a nice, quiet neighborhood, and suddenly you find out the government is trying to infill your neighborhood, I guess, and create this mixed zoning because they have these ideas that somehow it's better that you're living next to suddenly a ton of renters with a lot of new traffic and everything else. So
well, and it's always in the name of affordable housing. We have to get affordability back into our neighborhoods, into play. When the fact of the matter is, affordability is not something the government can determine. That's determined in the marketplace. But they don't understand that, and they don't want to understand it because their pursuit of power says they have to tell us how to act, how to think, and what to say.
Well, not to mention, though, just to jump in, affordable housing from the government always, it's like every war they do never ends. Well, the affordable housing always somehow creates unaffordable housing. I don't understand how this happens, but the government jumps in and suddenly it's costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars to house people in places like Los Angeles. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, I mean, you could just send them somewhere else and buy them a house in another place for this kind of money that you're talking about temporarily housing people for. Yes. So it's just absolutely insane. You get all these different incentives and perverse incentives and terrible special interests coming in, and they just muck it up. And it's so complex, none of us can see it. And none of us have the time to look when government gets complex. Anyway, sorry, Michael, I think you were getting ready to jump in.
I'm just going to ask you this question. Why do you suppose that is? Everything you just said, why do you suppose that is? Why is the government acting so irresponsibly and so against our liberty? Why?
I think that it's a little bit complicated. I think you do have these people, in the Great Reset type of thing mentality where they would like to change the way society operates. But I think there's also an awful lot of people who just don't understand that when you put things in government's hands, you get all the incentives wrong, right? I mean, you move away from private property rights. Now suddenly you have all these people making decisions. And because we're all tied to it, none of us have time as individuals to keep track of what government's doing. And so it gets complicated. And then people behind the scenes are making all the decisions. And it just goes, a concentrated interest will grab that power as well. So, whether it be a union or some corporation or whatever, they have the incentive to get in there and take control of it, where the rest of us, if it's costing us a few dollars here and there, we just don't have the time to keep track of everything government's doing. So I think it's complicated. There's certainly some maniacs that are trying to take over, but there's also just the incentives of concentrating power in government are just terrible.
Well, I think though, Jason, if I don't know if you're trying to say this, but let me say this. I think government have become so large, and at all levels. Well, we're talking about the United States here. Government have become so large that it has become an entity unto itself, that where its very purpose have now become its own survival. They are not here to serve us anymore. That is what the founders intended, that the government will serve the people, okay? And they'll have a very limited role in our lives. But that is not what is happening now. They have grown to this massive entity, this massive monster, where their very survival now, where it becomes the purpose for their existence.
Michael, I think you were going to jump in too and say something as well, or did you?
Yes, I was, but I forgot what I was going to say.
Which is part of the government's plan.
I'm 73, so but I think another part of this is that my wife got a call from somebody, and they were trying to get her to sign up for some free benefit from. You get this free benefit from the government. You get all this money, and my wife said, "Wait a minute, where do you think that money comes from?
Yes.
It comes from you and it comes from me. It's not the government's money. It's our money. And I think a lot of people have forgotten. They think that the government's some big daddy out there and that they're going to give them everything they need. It's kind of the nanny state approach, and which is what they're trying to, you'll own nothing and be happy. That's where they're trying to push us to. But I think that that's part of it too, is that free money. Well, there's no such thing as free money unless you're the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
Michael, are these the same people that thinks their savings account money is in a vault at the bank waiting for them to come in and pick it up?
Yeah, no, most people don't understand fractional banking at all. I mean, they just don't, and that's on purpose, by the way.
Yeah. Well, if I were to answer Michael's question, I would think that it's a lot of this stuff. It's this lust for power, and the government has gotten so large, so gargantuan, and is such a powerful entity in itself, and it feeds upon itself, and that there is the difference between people that basically people believe in the goodness of man, and the other people that feel that man is essentially evil, and that you need a member of my team to control all these evil men and women out there, this evilness of mankind, because essentially most people are evil. And so the people that believe that men are evil, they want a top-down central planner to plan everything for everybody else. They don't think they're evil, of course. They're the exception to the rule, but most people are evil. And then the people that believe that man is essentially good are people that are quite comfortable with relying on the invisible hand of the free market to order society, and because they believe that essentially people are good. So I think that's it. So you've got this separation, and more people are believing in the evilness of man, and less are believing, like I do, that man is essentially good, and that we can survive quite nicely in a free market amongst ourselves. Now, there are exceptions, though, but I can lump myself into the man is basically good category, and feel comfortable with doing that instead of the opposite, where I think everybody's evil except me. I'm the one lone holdout, and then everybody in my political party is also good, and so I'm going to vote for them. That's it, in a nutshell.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'm with you. I believe in the goodness of human beings. I think, and in my experience across my life, 99% of my experience with other human beings has been a wonderful, loving, positive experience. There are bad people out there, and there is evil, no doubt. But I think, to your point, Tim, is that I think a lot of this is intentional. They're dividing us by race, by income, by ethnicity, by religion, any possible division. That these people at the top, and I'll just say that I believe it's the central bank's owners that are ultimately responsible for this, because our money is dishonest. Money is like blood for society. It runs everywhere, right? And if you want something to grow, you give it more blood. If you want it to die, you cut it off. But our money, because it's based on basically a Ponzi scheme at the root, it's that blood that runs through society is basically like leukemia. We've got leukemia. And so we're going to inevitably go through these terrible boom and bust cycles, and where we bail out the banks and we bail out the too large to fail institutions. And I think all of this is by intention to drive us from one another, to steal our liberty, to put us into tyranny long term, like George Orwell said, that they'll put a boot on your throat and forever. And so I think we're coming to the end of an epoch in human society, because I think money itself is changing. We've got Bitcoin, we've got cryptocurrencies, etc., that are ultimately honest money, They're fiat, definitely. They're not backed by anything but confidence. But they don't inflate because it's a set amount. And so we're in a point in time, I believe, where an old age is ending, an age of scarcity and dishonest money, and people from the top, authoritarian, centralized control, trying to push us into a direction. And we're entering a new age of decentralization, honest money, when people will have, because of technology that's been delivered to us by our ancestors, we all have indoor plumbing now. And fusion power, a lot of other things are coming here that are going to transform our society for the positive. And these people at the top, the ones that George Carlin called the owners, they know this is happening, and they want to take control before society becomes liberated materially from all of these things, and I think spiritually and intellectually in a lot of other ways. So I'm honestly, from the end game of this, I think we're at a point in history right now that we're so privileged to be alive. We're so privileged to be alive to witness what's happening right now. We're seeing the end of an old order come about and the beginning of something new, which I don't know what that is, but I do sense that something new and wonderful, very wonderful, is coming towards us. But we've got to go through some really bad times, gnashing of teeth for our society. And we're going to see hunger, I think. I would think we're going to see a lot of bad things happening here in the next period of time, 3 years, 4 years. But on the backside of that, my personal belief is that it's going to be so bright. The future is going to be so bright. Shades won't do.
Yeah.
Well, on that positive note, maybe we should end the show.
Actually, I want to get to the Knucklehead Noise Patrol because it does tie in pretty well to what you're saying. So, Tim, you're just going to have to gut it out. But yeah, we will drop the other topic because we've gone a little bit long. But it is interesting. One of the things you said in that right before we jump to the Knucklehead Noise Patrol is that you said the idea that you don't know what's coming, but you got some trust in what you think is coming. And I think ultimately that's what libertarians are about. It's not saying that I know the answer and I'm going to force you to do it. And, and I'm just going to force all of you guys to go along with it. It's about saying, hey, look, I have the humility to say that, hey, there's a lot of people out there with good ideas, and let's just let some voluntary action happen and we'll see what happens. And that's probably going to be a lot better for most people than one person forcing their idea on everybody else. So I think that's a good way to see it. But, when you were talking about the corruption of money, I wanted to bring up our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, and Joe Biden has won that honor again. And in this one, James, maybe you could bring up the visual for us. He was recently talking about high-speed rail investment. And in that discussion, the way he talked about money was just like it's all kind of meaningless, right? He talked about over $1 billion, 300 million, trillion, $300 million. And so we do have a clip of that. We actually have 2 clips because I wanted to share something else about that. But James, could you play clip 2 first? Play KNP 2 before you play KNP 1.
We're finally going to make high-speed rail happen between Las Vegas and Los Angeles. We're investing $3 billion on this rail line so folks can make that trip in over 2 hours. This project in California is the most ambitious rail project in the entire Western Hemisphere. It expects to carry 31 million passengers a year, will be 100% powered by renewable energy, and once again, this project is about jobs. It's already created 12,000 good-paying union construction jobs, with thousands more to come.
Okay, so I got the order mixed up in that, but look there. That was essentially Reuters playing what they wanted you to take out of it. And you notice they sort of cut it up into various clips, but it actually sounded sort of rational what he was saying. But now here's what the New York Post took a clip of what he actually said during part of this, and that's what we're talking about the money. So can you play KNP 1 now, James? Sorry, I got the order kind of mixed up there.
Infrastructure Week, America's having infrastructure decade. over $1,300,000,000,300,000,000. Trump just talks the talk. We walk the walk.
So these sort of made up numbers, and it's funny, but it's like you see that and you think, my gosh, these people were in control of our economy, and they put these numbers out, and James, maybe you could bring up the visual here. I wanted to show this is where we're going, and these are the people that we have in leading us. So almost $34 trillion in debt is where we're at. And what that means to the average taxpayer is you essentially owe about $260,000 if we were all going to divide that up equally among taxpayers. If we divide it among everybody, which they don't intend us to do, I guess, it'd be about $100,000 per person. So that baby being born today, it's coming into life owing a mortgage of essentially $100,000. So this is kind of where we are with debt. But what does this mean too? I mean, this is a CBO's projection, and we talked about this a lot of times on our show. And here's where we're at. And this is debt to GDP. So that's the amount the country owes compared to how productive we are. So essentially, what they're showing here is that World War II was the previous height, where we had literally fought off Hitler and stopped the world from falling under tyranny. And we were at over 100% there. Well, we're about the same levels now with almost nothing to show for it. And here's what the CBO projects. It just projects us heading off into the stratosphere on all of this stuff with our debt. And of course, that's how we get to more inflation. But that's that first clip I showed of Reuters. I got them out of order, but I wanted to show that too, just because it shows that we're all seeing different realities here too. I mean, the idea that Reuters puts that together and they say this is what he talked about, and they just ignore the fact that he's rambling about ridiculous amounts of money that he clearly doesn't even understand how much this high-speed rail stuff is going to cost. I don't think he cares. It's just a matter of do it, throw more money at it, and there we are. So anyways,
I think it's worse than that. I think it's engineered. I think they're trying to tank the economy. I think they're trying to bust us. I think they want us, the people, to be beaten down so that, and I think there's an economic collapse coming in the currency because it is Ponzi scheme. And so this is, in my opinion, this is all engineered because they're going to step forward at some point with their New Deal, their Great Reset. And we're going to be so miserable. We'll be standing in in food lines, etc., that will take their central bank digital currency. Will take whatever deal they offer us. So I think, to me, this is all an intentional act by the people who are trying to control history, basically.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's intentional, but I would say, though, it goes back to the point I'm trying to make. The government have become so large that their survival have become their survival have become their purpose for their existence. And with that in mind, I think they're going to use the whatever money that we entrust them to bribe us, or bribe businesses, to bribe voters to do their bidding. And that, to me, is what is going on. This is the very corruption of our constitutional republic that is going on. That is what is happening. But maybe in that sense you could call it intentional, because they are really taking actions that destroys our liberties. But I think this all gets back to this very issue of the pursuit of power, where the government can tell us what to think, what to say, and what to believe.
The thing I would say to that, Leon, is that the government's money, that's not our money. The taxes are a small portion of the money that the government spends. Most of the money that's spent is printed out of nothing by the Federal Reserve. The government gives them an IOU. They give them the money. And that's why the national debt is skyrocketing. And yes, you're right. It went from $8 billion in 2008. Now, that's after 200 some odd years, right? And now we're at what, 34 billion?
almost 34.
And so they're just printing money like drunken sailors, and knowing that that's going to inflate the dollar, so that's why I say it's intentional. They're spending money we don't have, and so you and your kids, or mainly our kids, are going to have to pay for all this stuff.
Mm.
I told you guys we should have ended on Michael's positive note, and now I'm back to my cynical self.
It's going to end well in the end, Tim. I promise you.
Well, I will bring up a positive note for you to help get you back on track before we leave. And what I wanted to say is, I think we've recently seen, you were just talking about hope, Michael, and what we saw recently happen in Argentina was a guy named Javier Milei just got elected, and he is an out there libertarian. He wants to get rid of their central bank. And James, maybe you could bring up the visual real quick. And this was Javier Milei. We've talked about him the last few shows. This was the quote that sort of kicked off our quote thing, but it essentially said, "I did not come here to guide lambs. I came here to awaken lions." And I kind of feel like that's what Michael Rogers is here to do with his Freedom Party. He's come here to awaken lions.
I will take that, Jason. I will take that. Yes, it's a very positive note. I will take that. Yes.
Yes, that's exactly right, Jason. That's exactly. If you want to cut it right down to the essence, that's it. And guess what? There are more and more lions out there. Look at what's happening, like in Argentina and Venezuela. I mean, these places in Europe, we're seeing conservative, more libertarian-minded people being elected because the people have had enough. We're just getting fed up with this thing.
Yes.
And I think I've reached the point about, because I'm a Trump supporter now. I didn't vote for him in 2016. But I've just got to the point where I'm fed up. And I'm not going to take the bullshit anymore. If people want to talk to me and bullshit, and I'm going to call them on it. And I don't, again, I said this earlier, I don't care what they think about me. I'm going to speak my truth. And maybe that will plant a seed in their heads. And at some point, and again, courage is contagious. And if you show people that, you don't die when you speak your truth, it informs them, it gives them a little bit of extra push to speak their minds.
I think that's a great note to end on. And and if you've been watching us, you can catch more great conversations like this with people promoting liberty in their neighborhoods and across the country. You can find these conversations at Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, and Rumble. Just look for Knuckleheads of Liberty. You can also find us at knuckleheadsofliberty.com as well. You can check us out on public access in Sacramento on channel 17. We play at Mondays at 5:30. And I think they play a few reruns at different other times too as well. But go check those out. And if you're watching and this has inspired you at all, we hope that before the next show, you'll start thinking about things you can do in your neighborhood to advance liberty as well, because, this craziness is upon us. And if we're going to stop it, I mean, everybody has got to sort of get up and become a lion the way Michael is sort of hoping we're going to go with these parties he's doing. So thanks again so much for joining us. And until next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Yes,
Thanks for the opportunity.
No, thank you.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.